Welcome back to another Stand on Guard and all the answers to question period. I hope I have some answers for you today. I know sometimes it's hard to watch, but sometimes it's necessary to watch. And thanks for being here. This is probably the last question period we're going to do for what, 6 weeks? Like I said yesterday, the reason you saw Justin Trudeau on his feet so often is the last time he's going to be in question period till probably February. And you can bet he's going to someplace warm this December or January or both. And he is going to be doing his usual, enjoying himself at your expense. But it looks like it's time to join. We'll be back in a sec.
8 years of this Prime Minister, Canadian families
Here we are.
spend a higher percentage of their family budget on debt servicing. This is a record in Canada, the higher percentage than US family debt before the 2008 crisis. Will the Prime Minister finally invert his inflationary taxes and deficits so that Canadians can finally eat and house themselves? Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives continue to denigrate the Canadian
economy.
His
vacation
I would like to take
early.
the opportunity on my end to remind them of some of the results of our economic plan. For example, our GDP is now at 4.1% higher than pre-pandemic levels.
Wanted to add, while I'm thinking of it, is that the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs recommended today that this deadbeat speaker, this partisan speaker, Greg Fergus, not resign, just apologize. And we're back.
The economy has contracted per capita over 5 quarters. Our economy is smaller per capita than 5 years ago after 8 years of this Prime Minister. It is simply not worth the cost for housing. The Bank of Canada has stated that housing costs are now worse than at its worst 41 years ago, and rent goes up faster than ever before in history. When will the Prime Minister stop?
Thanks. Welcome your comments. Thanks, nerd. First one up today, Keith. I know you're a regular. Thank you for joining me again. We won't be talking for 6 weeks.
Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Leader of the Opposition, but Mr. Speaker, for the Canadians watching us at home today, there is one thing that the Leader of the Opposition hasn't mentioned, is that Canada is the third globally when it comes to foreign investment, behind the United States and Brazil. Record investments like Norvolt.
They've always
Quebec,
got some great stats, don't they?
Volkswagen investments in St. Thomas.
You can't afford to eat anymore in Canada,
BHP
but we're just doing so well.
Doug Darfur in Saskatchewan as well. We have a plan for a 21st century green economy, and that's how we'll create jobs for the generations to come.
Leader of the official opposition.
We already knew that the Prime Minister is not worth the price of food after 8 years of inflation. But yesterday he couldn't answer how a mushroom farm in my riding is supposed to pay its $100,000 carbon tax bill. Well, he did send the farm a Christmas present. A new bill.
He's mentioning Mike's farm again.
November
There we go.
9th to December 6th bill. Federal carbon tax,
there we go.
$16,050 for 1 month. And it's not even winter yet, Mr. Speaker. How would the Prime Minister like this farm to pay this $16,000 monthly bill? Raise food prices?
I also have to warn people about using props in the House. The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy to be. I was in.
Well, I'm going to allow the Honourable Minister to start from scratch. The Honourable Minister of Environment.
I was in Dubai at COP28 in good company, Mr. Speaker.
What a loser. Dubai is a villain, not a hero.
Scott Moe, with representatives from almost all the Canadian provinces and business leaders from all across the country, Mr. Speaker.
You think you got a victory?
Our kids and grandkids have a future, something, unfortunately, that the Conservatives fail to understand.
Hey, I got more for you later about Gilbo. How much money he spent in China.
High-flying, high-cost, high-tax hypocrisy from the Minister of Carbon Taxes. We learned that he spent
There it is. There it is, folks, right there. Yeah. There you go.
the Carlton Mushroom Farms is going to spend this year now about 150,000 grand on carbon taxes. Will that just pay for one of his junkets?
I knew that story was going to be up today because it's just irresistible.
Also have to remind members just to use the.
And I have a Stand on Guard episode up already about it. You might want to watch.
Mr. Speaker.
Oh, not Seamus.
To Neville Chamberlain when he referred to Czechoslovakia's invasion by Nazi Germany.
What the hell is he must be dipping again.
As a faraway land. And in reply to that, Sir Winston Churchill gave one of his greatest speeches. He gave a speech of impunity that Roy Jenkins said was one of his greatest.
These people are so out of touch with reality.
An absolute coward, a capitulator. We should learn from such great
What
men,
the hell does Polye's question have to do with Czechoslovakia or Ukraine?
Democracy in this world.
I ask you, how stupid is that? Folks listening, you believe Seamus O'Regan had the gall to bring up Ukraine in response to that?
Pass himself off as Winston Churchill after he gave detonators for mines to the Russian military so that they could use them against Ukrainians, after he allowed the Iranian-linked IRGC to operate legally in Canada, 700 of its agents, by the way, which are also linked to Russia, operating in our country and terrorizing our people. Mr. Speaker, this is not Churchillian. This is hypocritical political grandstanding by a prime minister trying to distract from his failed carbon tax.
And the prime minister isn't even there. He had his
government house leader.
He had that intellectual pygmy.
Would say to the leader of the opposition, "Thou doth protest too much, I believe." And I would ask if any of those members.
You got any more Ukrainian Nazis you want to invite, Karina?
That the leader
Huh?
of the opposition is imposing on them. In fact, there is one.
You have any more Ukrainian Nazis to invite, Karina?
Who voted in favor of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade on Tuesday.
You're a joke, Karina.
I would ask, are there any
Time to go home.
Conservative members who have the courage of their conviction to stand up for freedom, democracy, and against the
Where's that? We don't have freedom and democracy in Canada, and they sure as hell don't have it in Ukraine.
The Honourable Member, Sarah Berry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, the Quebec government has been very clear with regards to dental insurance. The Quebec Minister for Canadian...
So you see that story that Polly have referenced. Guilbeault spent like $140,000, and that's not the full bill. That's only partial bill to go to China to meet with his communist Chinese buddies and in a Chinese communist environmental group. So he's whining and dining, having a great time at your expense, but he's worth it. It's okay because he's a climate change activist. He can do whatever he wants. He can spend as much money as he wants because he's got a special mission for you. But you've got to sacrifice. You've got to do without food. You've got to do without gas. You've got to do without electricity. You've got to do without natural gas because that's your job, not his. These people are fraudulent hypocrites. They are the worst kind of politicians on this planet. And this piece of baggage is one of the worst.
Currently, 9 million people did not have access to dental care. And now, with our new dental insurance system...
Hey, time to get a toupee, Mark.
Everyone will have access to it in every neighbourhood and every corner of our country, and that is what is essential, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Berry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, we are waiting for this government to improve employment insurance, but it continues to twiddle its thumbs. We expect it to settle once and for all the Phoenix fiasco, but once again, Paying or ensuring workers under its
Please,
responsibility seems to be
if
too
you
much
have
to
a
ask.
chance,
We expect the government to pay
like
for
this
asylum
program.
seekers, but radio silent on
If you
that
haven't
front as
subscribed,
well.
please
On the other hand, the
subscribe. We're
government's always up
trying
for
to
a
hit
little interference in
15,000 by
Quebec's
Christmas.
jurisdictions. Instead of creating a
We're less
private
than 2,000
dental
away.
plan, will the government
And share
come
it
to an
with your friends
agreement
and
with
family. I
the
know a
government
lot of you
Quebec
do
and
already,
transfer the
but I've
money
got to
to it
say
so
it.
that it
Hate,
can improve its own
never like to, but I've
public
got to say
plan?
it. So.
The Honourable
What a
Minister for
motley
Health.
crew that block is.
Mr. Speaker, we will, of course, be working not only with the province of Quebec, but every province and territory.
So I've got a video clip to show you as well of Stephen Guilbeault saying you can't trust liberals when he was a Greenpeace activist stuntman. Of course, all he is now is a liberal Trudeau government stuntman. He's a failure. He goes to COP28 and makes all kinds of announcements that are never going to happen. Threatens Canadians with nothing, with losing access to energy, threatens Canadians that they're going to starve and be impoverished while he's whining and dining overseas. The guy should have a bag over his head. He's an outrage. He's an absolute outrage to anyone's common sense. He's an outrage to common decency. But he stands up and announces how wonderful he is, and he has no shame about the money he wastes, your taxpayer money.
I'd like to thank the member for her question, but I wish she would be in the meeting, Mr. Speaker. She would have said that we are the first government in history to stand up to the CEOs of the grocery sector in this country, Mr. Speaker. For the first time in history, Mr.
You stood up to the CEOs, did you? Oh, the CEOs. What kind of CEOs did you stand up to?
The frustration of millions of Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We asked
frustration with you.
We talked to the large manufacturers, and Mr. Speaker, with the reform on competition, with the grocery code of conduct, with more information to consumer, we're going to help stabilize price in this country.
Yeah, sure you are. You're going to empty the shelves in this country is what you're going to do halfway.
The honourable member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Mr. Speaker, that minister would have a starring role in Oliver Twist. Please, sir, can I have some more? With holidays around the corner, parents are being forced
That's
to
not a
choose
bad line
between
for a
family
dipper.
dinner or gifts for their kids. But you know who's not worried? Canada's grocery CEOs who are gifting themselves Christmas bonuses. The Liberals continue letting corporate greed go unchecked. Meanwhile, the Conservatives play the part of Scrooge as they just voted against a national school food program.
And you
Mr.
people
Speaker,
keep propping up the Liberal government. Don't bother to attack the government in question period when you keep propping it up, because you are a hypocrite. The worst kind.
I'd like to thank the member for suggesting
so.
other career that I could pursue. But one thing that I will do, Mr. Speaker, is always
I don't
fight
know
for
what
Canadians,
kind of
Mr.
career
Speaker.
you could
It's
pursue.
always a good day to fight for Canadians.
The only
That's
career
what I've
you can
done with the
pursue
CEOs, Mr.
is a
Speaker.
useless
That's
one in
what we'll
politics.
continue. But if he wants to do something to help Canadians, help us to put pressure to have a grocery code of conduct in this country, Mr. Speaker. If you talk to the independent grocers in this country, that's one of the best ways to stabilize price, have more transparency, and make sure the small and medium-sized producer would have more equity in the negotiation with the large grocer, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the media
What a
reports that demand at the Boucher Généreux's food bank in Quebec City has doubled in the past 2 years. A Canada where people go hungry, that will be the legacy of this Liberal government after 8 years of governance. And the leader of the Bloc Québécois, who takes the liberty of insulting other party leaders and who claims to represent Quebec, is calling for a radical tax increase, insult to injury. Will the Prime Minister follow our common sense plan and eliminate inflationary taxes and deficits so that Quebecers can finally eat?
I see a lot of folks didn't think we were doing
Parliamentary
QP
Secretary.
today because we're about
Mr.
half
Speaker,
our
Canadians
usual
know
attendance.
full well that it is our Liberal government that is here with measures to support Canadians. I believe that Canadians see through this false discourse from the Conservatives. Why? Because but a few days ago, Conservatives voted against a national food plan. Were they really to care for Canadians, they would have not voted against their interests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, what Canadians and Quebecers know is that Christmas is on its way. They know that they don't have enough money to buy food. so they don't have any money to buy their presents. That's what Canadians have understood after 8 years of this Liberal governance. And on the other hand, we have our friends from the Bloc. The Bloc Québécois is demanding a radical increase on the tax on food. Is there anyone in this House that understands that after a while, we've had enough of taxes? Can the government commit to cancelling
that's really going to increase the amount of food.
And Merry
Put a
Christmas. Thank you,
tax
Mr.
on
Speaker.
food. The Liberals are so brain
The
dead.
Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
That member, who was himself a member of the armed forces, that last week he and his party voted against military aid to Ukraine, compensation to the Canadian Armed Forces. And on the subject of Ukraine, let me clarify all of the billion-dollar aid that we have provided to Ukraine, Mr. Speaker. Carl Gustav anti-tank weapon systems, 155mm ammunition, armored vehicles, Mr. Speaker. We have trained over 40,000 members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, and we will stand on the side of democracy every single time.
Really? You've never stood on anyone's side in democracy. And certainly there's no democracy here or in Ukraine.
Close, Mr. Speaker. Quattro Farms near Bow Island grows spearmint, peppermint, and dill, then distills those crops into essential oils. The 10-week harvest and distillation process this fall alone cost them $107,000 in carbon taxes. And that carbon tax will rise to well over $400,000 when this government quadruples it. How does the Prime Minister suggest Quattro Farms pay this $400,000? Will it be by raising prices on Canadians, or should Quattro Farms cut back on their production so Canadians are forced to import their food from polluting foreign farms?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate my honourable colleague's question. When it came to action, my honourable colleague and the Conservative Party of Canada voted against every program that would support agriculture. Mr. Speaker, it's a shame. Talking to agricultural producers right across the country, they cannot understand why a government, why an opposition would vote against on-farm climate action fund, a fund to help farmers adapt to climate change, which adds to the price of groceries.
The Honourable Member for Medicine Hat, Carson Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason we voted against them is we voted non-confidence in this attack.
Non-confidence.
Medicine Hat area is home to numerous greenhouse operations like Big Marble Farms, who grow fresh vegetables like cucumbers, peppers, and tomatoes. This year alone, Big Marble Farms will pay over $500,000 in carbon tax, and that'll rise over $2 million when this government quadruples it. How does the Prime Minister suggest Big Marble pay this extra $2 million? Will they raise the prices on Canadians, or should Big Marble cut back on their production so Canadians are forced to import their food from foreign polluting farms?
Why don't we bring up Ukraine again, you half-witted liberals?
Being a farmer and talking to farmers across
You're not
the
a
country,
farmer.
they
You've been a
cannot
farmer in 4
understand
decades.
why the opposition party would vote against so many programs that assist agriculture across the country. But also farmers find it very, very disappointing and cannot believe that you would vote against support for the Ukraine, to support for democracy.
Oh, the farmers are all united about that, are they?
The Honourable Member for Dufferin.
Better take your pill, Lauren.
Unlike that minister,
Yeah,
I actually
time to
spoke
take your
farmers
pill.
from Dufferin today, and one farmer from Burnett Farms is going to pay $40,000 in carbon taxes this year alone. And after this incompetent Liberal NDP government quadruples the tax, it will be $160,000. They don't need another government program. They need the carbon tax cut. So how is this farmer supposed to pay for it? Cut production, or so they have to import food from foreign polluting farms.
Oh, hell, 40,000, that's not going to pay. I wouldn't even pay 1 day for Stephen Guilbeault's trips.
Are puzzled with is the fact that in the age of
I'm puzzled why anybody would give you a standing ovation for 2 weeks away.
Hundreds of millions of dollars every year. The Conservatives have nothing to say to them. No plans to support them in the transition that will be necessary, Mr. Speaker, to be in the 21st century, to continue being a provider of food for Canada and the world. The Conservatives have no plan to help our farmers, no plan to fight climate change, and no plan to support the future of our kids and grandkids.
Yeah, it's
The
called
honourable member
being
for
productive.
Dufferin-Caledon.
That's the
With
plan.
that statement,
And
this
you know
radical
nothing about
carbon
productivity.
tax-loving environment minister has basically proven the point. His carbon tax hasn't stopped any of the effects on farms, but instead, farmers are left paying this punishing carbon tax. A chicken farm pays $15,000 for one barn this year in carbon tax. Wow. And after this ideologically obsessed minister quadruples the carbon tax, it'll be
Ideologically
$60,000
obsessed
for
minister.
one chicken barn.
Key
What is
phrase.
this farmer supposed to do to pay it? Raise prices or force Canadians to import their food from polluting foreign farms?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Ironic,
Give him
Mr.
another
Speaker,
standing
coming from a party
ovation.
that voted against supporting chicken farms just last week, Mr. Speaker. But
How the hell would you
is it
know? You weren't
radical
here.
to be in favor of fighting for
You
the
were
future of
getting
our
drunk
kids and grandkids?
in Dubai.
I don't think so. Is it radical to ensure that we invest in jobs of the 21st century in our communities across the country? I don't think so, Mr. Speaker. What is radical is to ignore one of the world's most defining issues of our time and have nothing to say about climate change. This is unacceptable. This is immoral, Mr. Speaker.
You bloody Marxist. Get off the stage because you don't represent Canada or Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The federal
In fact,
government
you don't
owes
even
Quebecers
represent your party
$460
anymore.
million for the reception of asylum seekers, a federal jurisdiction. But the federal government doesn't want to pay and has even the arrogance to bluntly repeat that it's not an ATM.
I want to show you a brief clip here. I want to show you a brief clip of Gilbo from 2001. And if you want to see more of this, have a look at my Stand on Guard episode for today, where I talk about how much money Gilbo is spending and just what an idiot he is.
Climbing the world's tallest building today to tell the world not to be fooled by the Liberal government. As the talk on climate change starts, we want to tell the world that the Bush and Canadian administration are out to kill the Kyoto Protocol.
So there's Gilbo saying don't trust the Liberals. That's back in 2001. He looked like a loser then. He's a loser today. All he is a stunt man for environmental extremism. And he wants you to starve. He wants you to be cold this winter, but he's going to keep jet setting around the world, dining at the best restaurants, staying at the best hotels, increasing his carbon footprint, which is about 1,000 times larger than yours is, or yours ever can be, because he's the one flying around the world and going to conferences in the desert. 2 weeks in the desert for a climate change conference. Think of all of that air conditioning.
Their fair share, but when Quebec foots a bill, Quebecers pay 100% of it. We offer 100% of services, we pay 100% of the bill. The federal government offers no services and doesn't pay a cent. That's clearly not a fair system. Will the Minister for Finance reimburse Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Minister for Immigration is in discussion with the Quebec counterpart. We are significantly contributing to this, $700 million a year to welcome immigrants in Quebec, $450 million over the past few years, just for housing refugees. What I would like to say to asylum seekers is that we offer provisional medical care, we accelerate the treatment, the processing of files, we facilitate access to work visas. So yes, we are doing our job. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Well, Quebecers welcome half of all asylum seekers in Canada. That's much more than our fair share. And it's Quebecers that foot 100% of this bill. Again, that is far more than our fair share, almost 5 times more. We will continue to do what we do best. We'll continue to be a welcoming nation, but we are not going to sit idly by and accept that we are the only ones doing our fair share.
You're a nation,
and the only ones being hospitable. Will the Minister for Finance pay back the $460 million she owes Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for the National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I have full confidence in discussions between our governments. Quebecers have been very welcoming and hospitable, and we've worked together very well. We've transferred $450 million for housing refugees. We offer provisional medical care. We accelerate the processing times for the files, and we have made it easier to get a work visa. I'm very confident we will reach an agreement.
For Haldeman Norfolk.
After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, farmers are struggling under the weight of this punishing carbon tax. Karen, a chicken farmer from Norfolk, pays $350 every month in carbon taxes. When the Liberals quadruple the carbon taxes, she will be paying $1,400 a month. Will this Prime Minister tell farmers like Karen how she's going to pay for the carbon tax hike? Should she charge Canadians more for food, or should she produce less so that Canadians will be forced to import food from polluting foreign farms?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Again, Mr. Speaker, it's a bit rich to hear them talk about the support for farmers when they voted against support for farmers just last week.
Don't you stop beating a dead horse?
Transition so that they can reduce their dependency.
You're the one who wants us to starve.
Competitive in Canada and around the world. What are they doing? They're voting against it, Mr. Speaker. They say they're in favor of farmers, but unfortunately, their record speaks the opposite. Thank you.
I'm definitely.
Member for Haldeman Norfolk.
You couldn't even find a farm on a map.
The carbon tax has very serious consequences. Karen deserves answers about how she's going to pay that $1,400 a month hike in carbon taxes. The Prime Minister said that farmers are working hard to protect the environment, but instead of rewarding them, the Liberal NDP government is taxing them into the ground. Does this Prime Minister expect farmers like Karen to charge more, or should she produce less so that Canadians will be
too
forced
successful,
to
Trudeau
import
said
food
yesterday.
from polluting
Farmers are
foreign
just too
farms?
successful. They have to be punished for their success. That's communism. That's Stalinism. That's Trudeau liberalism.
Against farmers, they voted against taking action on climate change, but they have also voted against dental care. That's 9 million people, Mr. Speaker, who they don't want to have access to dental care. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of seniors who they're saying are not going to be able to get dentures replaced if they were in government. They're talking about more than 1 million kids that they would say no, they can't get critical dental care because they want to vote against it. Their real agenda, Mr. Speaker, is cuts. When you look through the slogans, that's all that's there. Cuts.
When you look through the slogans, that's all that's there.
The
Yeah.
Honourable Member for Tobique Mactaquac.
And what about your talking points, boy?
Confidence in that government that needs to be replaced. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians from coast to coast are desperate for relief. A potato farming couple from Grand Sault has seen their freight cost alone rise over $300,000 a year due to the implementation of the carbon tax. Now these Liberals plan to quadruple it, which would cost them $1.2 million more in freight charges alone a year. How will the Prime Minister advise them to pay for this additional $1.2 million? Will it be by raising prices on Canadians, or should this farmer cut back on production so Canadians are forced to import food from polluting foreign nations?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I think the rest of us, at least on this side of the House, can see what's happening here. I think if we can see what's happening here, those weren't votes against government programs. Those were all just non-confident votes. We didn't mean that. We didn't mean any of that.
Amos looks like he's been visiting the corner again. So I was saying at the outset that the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs has said Greg Fergus doesn't have to resign because the NDP supported the Liberals in supporting the decrepit Speaker.
They think that what they just did there is all you have to do. It's not. What we do here is vote on the things. You voted against
On the
all
things.
the things. We've taken them all, and we will be using them in ads, in answers to questions, talking to our constituents on each and every one of them. We will, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to clarify.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to the NDP, a public inquiry has been called by this government into serious allegations of foreign interference. The inquiry needs to
Thanks to the
investigate the Indian
NDP.
government that allegedly ran a global assassination program.
There's nothing
that
to thank the
targeted and
NDP
murdered
for.
a Canadian on Canadian soil.
The Liberals can
Other
thank the
deeply
NDP for
concerning
propping up the
allegations
government.
have come up as well. Does the minister agree with the NDP that the public inquiry should also investigate interference from the Modi government, including in the recent Conservative leadership campaign?
Tara Jennings, holy is Seamus drunk?
Secretary.
I'm beginning to wonder, Tara. Yeah.
As the Prime Minister told this House,
You got to
this
be
is an
voting for
extremely
things.
serious
That's
matter.
what we're here for.
The
We're
safety
voting
of
for
Canadians and the
things.
integrity of our rule of
You
law
know,
is of
things.
fundamental importance. Law enforcement, including the RCMP intelligence agencies, continue to investigate in close collaboration with their U.S. counterparts. We expect the government of India to cooperate fully with this investigation. As it is an active investigation, we will not comment further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr.
Honourable member
Speaker.
for Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, this morning the Environment Minister told our committee that, quote, we need to pick up the pace when it comes to fighting climate change. Now, notably, this is from the minister that is responsible for the pace in fighting climate change.
Shut up with your climate change shit. Yeah, I just posted the non-confidence petition again today. If you haven't signed it, do so if you want to. And forward it to people who would also like to sign it. Because we need to highlight how desperate Justin Trudeau must go. And
House, Mr. Speaker.
thank God
And I
another
thank the
proud
honourable
socialist
member
got up and
for
asked
it.
me a question.
In fact, we are picking up the pace, Mr. Speaker. When we came into power in 2015, emissions were going through the roof, and now we've been able to reduce emissions levels 7% below 2005 level.
You know, through the roof. How many? How much? How many emissions? What is Canada responsible for global gas emissions? He probably doesn't even know.
6 new pieces of regulations to ensure that Canada reaches our target in 2030.
It's all fraudulent. It's all a game.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous people living in urban, rural, and northern
Oh,
areas
here
face
comes
unique
a
challenges
softball
accessing
question.
adequate housing and do not qualify for support that is provided to Indigenous people living on reserve. Through budgets 22 and 23, the government is committed to the co-development of a dedicated urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy to address these gaps. Just last
they're
week,
all
the House
irrelevant. He's
considered
right.
funding for this strategy. That is something that the Conservative leader voted to cut. Can the Minister of Indigenous Services tell us how this funding will be used
shut up.
to
I
address the
don't
housing?
want to hear your softball answer and your softball question. Stephen Corriveau, what these clowns don't realize is this WEF stuff will make them all irrelevant. They already, yes, they are irrelevant now. They are working for their masters at the WEF. They are working for the globalists, and they will be the first to disappear. As in any revolution, the ones who work hardest to overthrow the previous regime are the ones who are disposed of first. That's what's going to happen to these acolytes of globalism. That's what's going to happen to these disciples of the World Economic Forum. They are dispensable.
They farm about 2,000 acres, and this
Hey,
year they
Michelle,
will pay
that's the one.
$10,000
Michelle
in carbon
Ferrari's the
tax,
one
which will
sponsoring this petition I just posted again.
$40,000. Now, that may not seem like a lot to this Prime Minister and his trust fund, but it's a lot to the Hawes family. So my question is, will the Prime Minister call Brian Hawes? Will he explain to him how he expects him to pay this extra $40,000? Should he raise prices on Canadians, or should he cut production so that Canadians are forced to import food from foreign polluting farms?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, just a few days ago, Conservative members voted against the interests of farmers. Just a few days ago, they also voted against measures to promote women's participation in the economy, against free menstrual products, Mr. Speaker, against funding for sexual misconduct investigation, and against subsidizing childcare. Mr. Speaker, what do the Conservatives have against measures that support women?
Good question. The Honourable Member.
It's just a parade of red herrings from these people.
Mr. Speaker, classic liberal
Try again,
deflection.
Michelle.
When they are down, they will deflect at every fact they can. These are the facts. Under this Prime Minister, housing prices have doubled. Under this Prime Minister, food bank usage is the highest in history. On the OECD, we rank 35 out of 38 in teen mental health. Suicide. And who feeds families? Farmers. Who are they cutting? Farmers. So Mr. Speaker,
The Liberals
again,
are
I will ask,
creating
will
a
they
market
axe the
for
tax and make
suicide
life affordable?
with their
And the changes
medical
that
assistance and
everybody
dying
knows, they
program,
are
which is
not
a
telling the
blatant
truth.
euthanasia program that is increasingly getting larger. Now, how dare the Liberals have the gall to suggest that they are somehow in support of
This is my
intervention
disappointed face.
against suicide?
We can't say whether someone's been telling the truth or not telling. Let's
Yes, we can.
be careful on that stuff. The honourable government house leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If they want to talk
Let's
about
just make her-
reflection, it's because they don't want to talk about the vote that they took against the Canada and Ukraine.
Do you want to talk about inviting Nazis and how you wanted to erase history? Why don't we talk about that, Karina? Would you like to talk about that?
Bullying, MAGA style of their leader, and that's the member from Lethbridge. I heard a lot.
Well, let's
of
talk
members
about the
try to say
bullying
that they
communist
supported
style
Ukraine
of the
over
Liberal
last
Party.
couple of days, but actions speak louder than words, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple of days ago, they voted against Canada's NATO mission in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, they don't need to stop deflecting. They should be honest with Canadians about why they're not supporting Ukraine. Is it because there are several members that are MAGA-style conservatives? It's a question Canadians need to ask. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
They just repeat nonsense. What is a MAGA-style conservative? I mean, what the hell does that have to do with anything that's going on in the Conservative Party
Thank you, Mr.
caucus?
Speaker. That's embarrassing deflection from the party that sent a gas turbine back to Russia that is funding Putin's war. Absolutely embarrassing for those Liberals. They have so much to answer for and how they have abandoned Ukraine where it counts. Now, Mr. Speaker, Darren is a turkey farmer that I spoke to today. Pays $30,000 in the last year in the carbon tax. By the time it's quadrupled, it will be almost 120 grand. Mr. Speaker, my question to those Liberals is simple. Do they expect him to raise costs or to cut back production so that Canadians are forced to import food from polluting foreign jurisdictions?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to food security, we always have to remember that the breadbasket of the world is a country called Ukraine. And I'm going to use the title of that country deliberately, because when you can't...
Order. 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 Folks, colleagues, order. Large. Thank you. Je pense qu'il y a un problème de traduction.
I think there's a translation problem. They can't hear the honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you, we've hit our limit. When interpreters tell you 3 times in a row that there's too much noise to interpret and that they're getting hurt, it's time to stop. This is our last day. Let's be adults.
Let's be adults. And that's coming from a separatist who's stealing our money, who wants a pension from the federal government that she wants to overthrow. Get out of the house.
Quick reminder, we're almost done.
To keep the temperature down just a little bit so we can get through this. Interpretation is a challenge, a lot of cases when there's lots of noise in the chamber. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General, 21 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I use the term Ukraine deliberately because when I hear somebody who aspires to lead this nation incapable of saying the term Ukraine and calling that nation that is fighting for its very existence a faraway foreign land.
The war is over, you moron. Do you not know that?
We on this side of the house
Do we have to spell it out for you? The war is over. Ukraine has lost. It's a corrupt country, the most corrupt in Europe. Zelensky's a crook.
This week they abandoned Israel at the United Nations, and that member should know that it is Canadian detonators that are ending up in the fields of Ukrainian farmers. They should be absolutely embarrassed and ashamed of themselves for abandoning the farmers of Ukraine.
I can't wait for this war to end so we don't have to have this ludicrous competition between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Who loves Ukrainian crooks more?
For Darren, it's 120 grand that he has to recoup somehow. This is an uncomfortable question because high prices are a feature, not a flaw of the carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, how do they expect Darren to pay the bills?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the member mentioned Ukraine. It was shameful to see Conservative MPs attempt not once but 5 times to silence the MP from Etobicoke Centre when he pointed out the Conservative voting record against supporting Ukraine. Former Conservative Cabinet Minister Peter Kent.
Climate change in Ukraine is all these clowns can talk about. What a country. What a country.
You know, we're just about 3 o'clock, and the more we attack one another, the louder it's going to get in here. So I would just suggest that everybody bring it down a notch. Christmas is coming. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, and you can all go on your 6-week vacation.
Peter Kent put it in this way, and I quote, "When partisan politics trumps principled unity and support for a valiant democracy," he was referring to the Conservative record voting against Ukraine and free trade. No amount of doublespeak or empty talking points will change that, Mr. Speaker.
Where is Fergus today? He's already taken off.
2023 was a miserable year for farmers.
Miserable year for the bloc, as always. The John Kennedy. You asked, where is Fergus today? He's already taken off. The committee examining his incompetence and his partisanship has given him carte blanche. They said, go and stay, we love you, because the Liberals and the NDP coalition on the committee supported him, even though the Liberals came up with these ridiculous anonymous letters in his support, which are actually written by prominent Liberal supporters. I've written about it on the Post Millennial, and thanks to one of the Conservative members on the committee, we know about this. They were fabricated. Oh, Lawrence, time to have a nap. Time to go to the rest home.
The provincial government and the territories.
Did you take your pill today, Lawrence?
Put in place. Anything I can do to help, as I said yesterday to my honourable colleague, anything I can do to help the farmers in Quebec, I will do. But there are guidelines to follow.
All right, so now you can take your pill, Lawrence. Yeah.
2023 was a miserable year for our farmers. However, there's already an easy way to make 2024 a better year.
Stephen Guilbeault.
The federal government can
great year for environmental extremists.
To
great year
emergency account
for
without
climate change activists who want to bankrupt the country and have you starve and freeze. Great year for those people.
It's an easy thing to do, and it would be
not
such
a great
relief
year
to farmers who
for
are working
Canadian
their fingers
taxpayers,
to the bone
and not a great year for Canadians who can't afford to live anymore.
Before the holidays. Will the
and
government
look at these people,
extend the January 18 deadline?
Don't you just get sick of these goddamn politicians?
The Honourable Minister.
You know, they sit there and they sit there lapping it up, lapping up the praise,
emergency business
and
account,
they get a
COVID,
6-week vacation.
To support businesses with wage subsidies, rent subsidies.
It really is atrocious.
Now, when it comes to repaying that emergency account, Plan A, they have the money, they pay it back. And
I don't know if you follow.
Anyway, forgiven. Plan B.
Bebo has got nothing to say. I don't know if you follow American politics at all, but nobody gets a 6-week Christmas vacation in Congress. It's outrageous what Canadian MPs get away with. It really is.
Production are at an all-time high. The truckers who transport our grain, deliver the fertilizer and fuel farmers need, and haul our groceries to the store for Canadians to buy, pay the carbon tax, but pass it along to the farmer and the consumer. A trucking company in Swift Current pays $20,000 per truck per year in carbon tax. Once the Prime Minister quadruples this cost to $80,000, how does he expect them to pay for this? Will it be raising prices on Canadians, or should our farmers cut back on production so we are forced to import food from polluting foreign farms?
That's their latest phrase, polluting foreign farms.
Mr. Speaker, the part that is actually quite incredible about the position taken by the Conservatives under their leader's guidance is that when you abandon Ukraine, you're not just abandoning.
Oh, this has something to do with Ukraine again. How could I have missed that? Hey, Arab,
millions of other East Europeans that are
also you hearing something the rest of us aren't, Arab?
Against Russian authoritarianism. Who am I talking about, Mr.
We have Trudeau authoritarianism. It's probably worse, actually.
The honourable member, just the honourable minister, 10 seconds in the response.
That's exactly what he's doing. He is a disgrace in any house. He'd be a disgrace in my house or yours. He doesn't have any intention of answering the question. He wants to talk about
You're abandoning
the
East
damn
European
Ukrainian
Canadians.
war
You're
again.
abandoning
That's already
Polish
lost.
Canadians, Baltic Canadians, all of whom have a vested interest in pushing up against Russian authoritarianism under Putin. I wish the Conservatives could show some support for that.
We need to resist Trudeau's tyranny and liberal authoritarianism.
Mr. Speaker, we've been had. After 8 years of liberal incompetence, Canadians are sinking deeper and deeper into debt, hard hit by 8 interest rate hikes in 18 months. Canadians are spending over 9% of their disposable income on interest charges alone. How's that for a gift? When debt payments outpace growth of disposable income, will the costly Liberal Bloc NDP coalition ease the pressure on interest rates by eliminating the carbon tax and stop ruining the lives of Canadians?
That's what they do best, is ruin the lives of Canadians.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation. We will take no lessons from the
Kelly
Conservatives.
Kingston,
Imagine the gift that Conservatives gave
is Trudeau already
to
on
Canadians.
vacation?
They
You
voted
bet he
against
is.
aerospace.
Yeah,
they voted
gone
against
yesterday.
supporting tourism.
So the fun this winter will be to find out where he went and how much of it was spent with taxpayer money.
Conservative MPs from Quebec must feel knowing that they voted against the plains of Abraham. On this side of the House, we're going to fight for Canadians, fight for jobs, and fight for growth.
Since when has this joker ever been interested in the plains of Abraham?
Gets quiet for a minute, it goes back up. I don't know what's going on. L'honorable député de Lévis-Lotbinière.
Monsieur le Président, le plus
Mr. Speaker, the best gift that Canadians could get in 2024 is a Conservative government. Canadians are sinking deeper every day with the costly Liberal Bloc NDP coalition. And Quebecers are also spending more than 9% of their disposable income on interest costs, proof that it's expensive to vote Bloc in Quebec. When will this government allow Canadians to choose their future? The choice is clear. A coalition that wants to radically raise taxes, or a good Conservative government that will...
I like this suggestion from Mandy K.L. Maxwell. Why can't we do a million-person march to have our Prime Minister resign? This is why we've got to get the focus off of foreign wars, like Ukraine and Israel and the Gaza, and focused on what's important for Canada, which is domestic politics, and get some unity amongst people who believe in the same things, which is common sense, politics, morality, and ideology, and who are united in their determination that Justin Trudeau must go. That's where the focus should be, and that's what we should be expending our energy on. Not having fights in the streets over foreign wars.
Side of the House, we're fighting for all Quebecers, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
agrees with me. Bingo did. Yes, we need to focus on what's important in Canada.
Racism has no place in Canada and never will. This week, our government launched the renewed multiculturalism
Here comes a softball.
Anti-racism program and call for proposals to help organizations build capacity. This funding aims to help organizations have capacity to support their communities and foster inclusion. Can the minister explain what actions the government has taken to address systemic racism and discrimination and celebrate our diversity?
Last question today. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member is absolutely right. This week we launched the call for proposal for the renewed multiculturalism and anti-racism programs to help organizations build capacity. This is yet another example of our government's unwavering commitment to addressing racism and promoting a more inclusive Canada. But Mr. Speaker, I wish I could say the same thing about the Conservative Party of Canada, who voted against Canada's anti-racism strategy. And just last week, Mr. Speaker, they voted against funding for the new Montreal Holocaust Museum and the redevelopment of the Jewish Community Centre in Vancouver. It's shameful, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
The NDP Liberal government's billion-dollar green or greed slush fund is in a crisis of corruption. The CEO resigned in disgrace. The Liberal-appointed board chair resigned in disgrace. The Auditor General is investigating. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is investigating. 2 Liberal appointees. And this week, we heard from whistleblowers that $150 million was embezzled by Liberal insiders. Canadians want to know, where did the missing millions go and who got rich?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, for Canadians watching at home, they're seeing the conservative ideology in full display, Mr. Speaker. These folks are so against climate change, Mr. Speaker, that they'll go after anyone,
back to climate
any
change.
organization that wants to fight climate change. Even an organization that was voted 20 years ago by Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Now they want to attack the integrity of one of the most respected
your cork is
in this
popped
country,
again,
Mr.
Champagne.
Speaker. On this side of the House, we'll get to the bottom of this, but we'll keep investing in clean technology. We'll keep investing to fight climate change. We'll keep investing in Canadians.
The Honourable Minister.
You keep investing in your back pocket. That's the only thing you people know how to invest in.
Liberals would think shoveling hundreds of millions of dollars into the pockets of their friends is doing anything to fight climate change. They're under multiple investigation, and it's their appointees that are being investigated.
Never been a more corrupt bunch of
Canadians
SOBs
are lined up at
occupying
food banks
government in
in
Canada.
record numbers, and liberal grifters
And
embezzlers
not only
are
corrupt, but
jamming
arrogant
their pockets
SOBs.
full of Canadians' tax dollars. Canadians want to know who got rich and where did the missing millions go. But Mr. Speaker, with an Auditor General investigation and 2 Ethics Commissioners investigation, is the RCMP next?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I know it's Christmas. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion,
Hey,
but not
for
your
you,
own
it's
facts,
all
Mr. Speaker.
Christmas,
It is
Champagne. Every
very
day is
important to
Christmas for you
understand
because you're
what
feeding off the
seeing in full
public
display in
crop
this
your
House,
whole life.
Mr. Speaker, is the conservative ideology against anyone and any organization, even those created by Parliament, Mr. Speaker.
Every question comes back to climate change for these morons. They cannot deal with anything that's real.
Has resigned. We'll get to the bottom of this. We'll restore confidence, but we'll keep investing to fight climate change.
You'll get to the bottom of this. Yes. Oh, yes.
Honorable Député de Mégantic-Lérable.
Take a seat.
Mr. Speaker, after
Give
8
your
years,
fat ass a rest. Take a seat.
Liberal cronies continue to get rich at taxpayers' expense. The whistleblower's incredible testimony revealed that $150 million of taxpayer money was diverted from the Liberal Green Fund. The Ethics Commissioner opened 2 investigations, and the Auditor General's investigating as well. It doesn't take an ethics professor to figure out there's been a breach of ethics. And yet, the Bloc Québécois voted against broadening the scope of the Ethics Committee's investigation to shed light on corruption. Which Liberal cronies got rich, and when will Canadians get their money back? The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
We will not get our money back.
Mr.
They're
Speaker,
stealing
I
it.
thank my colleague for his question because right before Christmas, it allows me to remind Canadians watching about conservative ideology. Conservative ideology attacks any organization that would want to fight climate change. This institution was created 20 years ago by the House of Commons, and the Auditor General has significant investigative powers. We're going to continue to invest into Canadians and green technology.
Saint-Louis.
Our children and all Canadians deserve
Maybe you should be investing in some brain cells because you don't have very many. It's quite obvious.
Fairness, and inclusion.
Oh, here's the wind-up. The wind-up softball.
Accountability, integrity, and safety.
Get it over the
On
plate,
Monday,
Francis.
The Minister of Sport and Physical Activity announced important measures that prioritize keeping our kids safe and keeping safe sport at the center of sport governance and operations.
What
Among
kind
other
of
things,
nonsense is
she
this?
announced the Future of Sport in Canada Commission.
I
Can
hope
the
it's not a
Minister share with
trans
this
sports
House
question.
Details on the mandate of this commission.
See, he's got his green folder
And
there.
thank my honourable colleague for the question. Mr. Speaker, in the past 2 years, athlete survivors have bravely come forward to share their stories so that we can learn, so that we can make our processes more safe for our kids, and we can get to the point where we got, thanks to them on Monday, where we announced the Future of Sport Commission, a trauma-informed, victims' rights, human rights-based process. We're going to dig into safe sport and make the entire system better. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Churchill-Kawadanokaski.
Mr. Speaker, big tech companies like Amazon, Twitter, Uber make billions of dollars a year and don't pay what they owe to Canadians. The Liberals said they put a plan in place for digital service tax by the end of this year, but they're delaying it. Canadians don't trust Liberals and Conservatives to make big tech corporations pay their fair share.
Isn't it funny? It's the Liberals and the NDP who are in bed together.
So, Mr. Speaker, will the
Did you not notice that lately, Nikki?
Implement a digital services tax, or will they bow down to American lobbyists?
The Dippers are so pathetic.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is supportive of international efforts to end the corporate tax race to the bottom and ensure that the world's largest corporations do pay their fair share. Our priority, of course, has always been a multilateral approach, but we must defend our national interest, Mr. Speaker. We won't accept a delay to the implementation of our own digital services tax without a clear timeline for an implementation with our global partners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, despite evidence on the misuse of international aid by Hamas, Canada recently pledged $16.2 million to nonprofit organizations in the region, including $10 million to the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, for its Palestinian programs. Mr. Speaker, how can Canada fund UNRWA when one of its own employees held an Israeli citizen hostage in Gaza? Hamas uses UNRWA buildings to launch rocket attacks. Over 100 Hamas terrorists attended UNRWA schools that teach anti-Semitism and Israel's elimination. Mr. Speaker, will Canada review its UNRWA funding and suspend it if the agency is found to comply in compliance with UN operational standards?
The Honourable Minister of International Development.
Speaker, I've had numerous meetings with the head of UNRWA, Mr. Lazzarini. The decision to cut funds during an unfolding humanitarian catastrophe is actually counterproductive and jeopardizes the delivery of essential food, medicine, and other life-saving materials to those who need it the most. In these crucial times, trusted agencies like UNRWA must receive more support, not less. And it's great to see the honourable member really use political points against vulnerable people in their time of need. I wish we had more compassion for members of this House like the honourable member.
And that's all the time for question period today.
That's all the time. There we go. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. Sometimes it's difficult to stand it, I know, because it's a barrage of mendacity. It's a barrage of lies and deception and half-truths, maybe one-quarter truths at a time. And it really is a frustrating experience. But we need to continue to work, as I said, for Canada, not for Ukraine, not for Palestine or Israel or Gaza, but for Canada. We need a secure border, and we need to ensure that our military is getting funded, not Ukraine's, because every cent we sent to Ukraine has either been stolen by corrupt politicians and oligarchs or has been lost on the battlefield. Trudeau has given away all of our Leopard tanks, and they're all gone, destroyed by Russian tanks. Ukraine never had a hope or a prayer of winning this war. They should not be a member of NATO. They have no right being a member of NATO. We said that 20, 30, 40 years ago, that an independent Ukraine should not be a member of NATO. And that is a fact. And as long as we as Canadians are focused on Ukraine, on Gaza, or on other issues other than what is important for Canadians, we are going to allow Trudeau to triumph. And that's what he's doing. He's playing Canadians for fools. He's playing them big time by getting their focus shifted from what's important here. We need to fight gender ideology. We need to fight so-called pride season. We need to fight euthanasia. We need to fight climate change extremism. We need to fight Trudeau's ghastly economic policies. We need to lower interest rates. We need Canadians to have real jobs so they can pay bills. We need a country that's focused on its self-interest and not supposedly fighting for freedom and democracy in Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. I can't say enough about that. But here we are in the precipice of Christmas. This will be our last House of Commons visit for probably about 6 weeks. I'll see you back then. Please continue to watch this network, this channel for the shows I'm putting up. I will continue to put up throughout the Christmas season. And thanks for your support. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to keep doing this as much as possible. I can't always be in front of the camera at 2:15 because I do get out and I do report, unlike a lot of the folks who are doing this kind of thing on YouTube or Rumble who never leave their basement. I think it's important to get out and talk to real people, to be a part of the political scene and not just to comment on it from your chair, and to actually be involved and participate. And I keep doing that. I'm still a real journalist outside of what I'm doing here. I do write stories for the Post Millennial Human Events and the Epoch Times, and that's, I think, is important to keep doing. So Merry Christmas to you all. And I'm going out to Vancouver tomorrow. It's a very sad mission. I have to attend a memorial service for my sister, who completely unexpectedly passed away some weeks ago, and I think it was COVID related. I think not the pandemic, not the disease, but the vaccine. I sincerely believe that, and I've had that confirmed by sources close to me. But I hope your Christmas is a merry and jolly one. God bless you all, and we will continue to give you the news you want to hear and the information you need to prosper as Canadians. Thank you so much.